This week on a special edition of Nerds Without Pants. Not kung fu fighting. We're just gonna beat the hell out of a bunch of, like, Yakuza thugs, okay? That's all we're gonna do. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a impromptu special edition of Nerds Without Pants. Yet again, miscommunications happen sometimes when it comes to when we're supposed to record and who's supposed to show up. And normally that would be a big problem because I wouldn't have anybody to play off of with Angelo being gone. And if Patrick doesn't show up, then that's not a show. But fortunately, we do have a show because we have a very special guest. We have Joey.
Hello. SuperStep on Pixelbit.
That's right. Astute listeners, longtime listeners will know Joey from his many wonderful contributions to Stage Select and Chrono Crossing and what have you, and also very lengthy comments on pixelbit.com that I always mean to respond to in depth and then usually forget to. And then by the time I remember to comment, it's usually just like a one or two sentence comment. But they're very good comments that I appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, I don't expect everybody to read the whole thing. I
enjoy a mostly recent thing where you'll kind of comment as you're listening to the show. So you'll be like, oh, I'll come back after, I'm at like the hour mark. I'll come back when I've listened to the next chunk, and then there'll be some more comments, and it's like, oh yeah. I appreciate the consistent feedback, and also the fact that you enjoyed my Peter Griffin impersonation. Because I think it sounds good. But I've also never recorded myself doing it. I've only heard myself in my head doing it.
Yeah. I used to have a good Peter Griffin accent. I think it's gone. But yours is pretty good.
Thank you. Yeah, I used to do it all the time, but then I don't watch the show anymore. So, but I used to do Peter all the time. I used to do a little bit of Cleveland, and then some Stewie and Brian, because I used to freaking love that show. And then at some point it just became too much in capital letters. Like, just couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, that scene where they kill Mary Poppins was a little overboard.
I don't even know if I've seen that one. I remember I forget the episode that I was watching, but I was like, I just remember it was like, again, I mentioned the How I Met Your Mother, like, glass breaking thing, but it was like, there was this moment where I was just watching, I was halfway through, and it was just like, I don't like this anymore. So I can still watch the old stuff just fine. But at some point it just got a little bit, as most shows do that go that long. Like, I can't really watch Simpsons anymore either. I don't think that I've regularly watched The Simpsons in more than half of its run now, which is weird because.
My question is, who has? I'm so surprised that they have the resources to keep it going.
Yeah, there's some people out there watching it, and the funny thing is that I remember when season 1 came out on DVD, there was a little note from Matt Groening inside saying, "Hey, welcome to The Simpsons on DVD. The show's been going on so long, and it's still going that, by the time we finally finish, we'll probably be on a different format." And it's like, yeah, we've gone 3 formats since then, and it's still going. So, yeah. But we're not here to talk about Fox Animation. We decided, since Patrick couldn't make it, obviously we can't do our regular episode because the Stage Select pick is Patrick's, and it's his job to host it. So we're, we want Patrick to come and host that edition because it's his Stage Select topic. So in lieu of that, Joey is a huge Yakuza fan. I believe relatively new also, just from judging from your comments over the last few months to the show. And then same thing for me. As I mentioned when I was playing Yakuza 0, nobody told me what Yakuza actually was. And it's a weird, I even wrote this in my review that what we're going to be talking about is mainly Yakuza Kiwami 2, but we'll talk about the series as a whole. I don't want to, for people who are tuning out, this isn't going to be a spoiler cast. This isn't really like focused on that. Really what I want to do is kind of just talk about the series and how both of us have become converts of it, and maybe get a few more people that are listening interested enough to play the game. Because one of my favorite things about Nerds Without Pants, other than when we get like really pleasant reviews and stuff like that, is when I hear people like either in the comments or on Twitter saying, oh yeah, Julian was talking about like so-and-so game and I picked it up and I really liked it. Cause that takes me back to my retail days, because I don't think I ever had anybody return a game that I recommended to them because they didn't like it. Cause I was very good about talking to somebody, figuring out what they were into, and then putting a game in their hands, and then them just really loving it. So if I get to do that via podcast form, like that really like makes me happy inside.
That's awesome. Yeah, nobody told you what Yakuza was because you thought it was like a Grand Theft Auto clone, right? Nobody told me it existed. I did not know this series existed until Yakuza 0.
Oh, okay. So Yakuza 1 on the PS2 was a big deal as far as Sega went, because they got like an all-star cast to dub all of the characters. And it was a big, like they promoted it really heavily. It was a big release, and I don't think it sold very well, but just from like reviews and screenshots, and I think at this point I would have been able to see, there would have been like video that I could have looked at, because we're talking about like 2004 or so, like, yeah, I would have had like streaming video, you know, just in crappy form at that time. It always just looked like, oh, it's GTA, but in Japan, which actually I want that. But at the time I was getting, back then I was actually ready to stop playing video games because everything was a GTA clone at the time, and I was just kind of over it by then. I was like, everything's just like super violent, super cussy, you know, like trying to be edgy for edgy's sake. And I was just like, if this is where the game industry is going, like, I think I'm done.
Yeah, that's actually why I didn't want to play Jak 2 when it came out. When I rented that one, I wasn't that interested. Like, now I want to play it, but at the time I was just like that, and then Prince of Persia Sands of Time was like a really big game for me. And then Warrior Within. The first few 10 minutes had him calling a female character a bitch, and I was like, this wasn't what the game was. What the hell is it?
Right. Yeah, it's like and I mean it goes in waves, right? Like it happened after Mortal Kombat, and then it kind of subsided, and then GTA 3 came out, and then everybody was trying to be as edgy as possible, and then it kind of died down. I feel like we're kind of getting back up to that crest, you know, where people are trying to be edgy again, but I think games are a little bit smarter about it now. You know, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess you could say that about the Yakuza series. Like, it is dark, and they do have, like, you know, cussing and violence in it, but it's smarter than you would expect.
Yes. One thing that I found interesting is that, and if you want to talk about like narrative dissonance, like, because people will always bring up like GTA 4. I've brought this up on the show before, where, you know, people were saying like, oh, you know, Nico wants to be a better man, but then he's just killing people indiscriminately all the time, even though that's really not quite true, because all the people in the story that you're killing are like other criminals. But anyway, like in the story of Yakuza, like they put a lot of weight against actually killing someone, right? Like a lot of times Kiryu doesn't want to kill somebody. But then those heat actions, like I totally will take a knife and jam it into a guy's stomach and then knee that knife further into the guy's stomach. And it's like, you're not getting up from that.
Well, that, and like, he's like basically, Kiryu to me is just Japanese crime organization Batman, where it's like he doesn't, like that old sketch where I think Patton Oswalt was playing the Penguin in it, where he's like, you clearly killed that guy. He's like, no, I didn't. That's kind of what reminds me of when I play Yakuza. But like, not only the knife heat actions, but also the gun one, where he just shoots a guy 3 times and then, you know, pistol whips him in the head.
Right.
Which is like completely the antithesis of his character in any cutscene.
Yes, definitely. And I guess I should back up a little bit in case listeners are completely unaware of what Yakuza is, like I was. It's a role-playing game. It is a third-person action RPG set in the streets of Japan with like this gritty, kind of hard-boiled look at the Japanese underworld through the eyes of a sometimes Yakuza, sometimes ex-Yakuza, sometimes back into the Yakuza character named Kazuma Kiryu, who, I like to call him like the Yakuza with a heart of gold, because even though, I don't know. These games give a really interesting window into Japan, and I've watched anime for years and stuff like that. I've been very interested in Japanese culture, but you don't think of like the American mafia as being like arbiters of like peace in the area, or like, keeping things organized, where the Yakuza come across as, yeah, they're violent, and yeah, they have a lot of like fingers in crime, but then also people reach out to them for help. And there's almost like this like code of honor, even with like the bad Yakuza, like there still seems to be some sort of order that they're espousing,
Well, having researched it like just a little bit, just because after playing the games, I was kind of interested, like how much of this is really what Japan is like. There are some documentaries that point out like I don't know if the game is really completely true to current Japan life, because there is like a lot of police pressure being put on the Yakuza. Like basically from what I've seen, they used to be a lot more prevalent than they were. Now they've gotten a lot smarter, and they're basically white collar criminals.
Ah, okay.
Because they have to be, because the police are cracking down on them so hard in Japan. So that's what I've heard. I mean, I don't know like what actually, because there was actually something I was reading after I played Yakuza 0. There's a character in Yakuza 0 who's like all about the excess of the 80s. He wears like a purple suit. And he's kind of like, his philosophy is like, why do we have all these rules? Like, why don't we just do whatever makes us money? And apparently there was kind of a paradigm shift within the Yakuza itself in real life, where like there used to be these codes of honors, and then they kind of said, well, fuck that. Why don't we just make more money?
Right.
So apparently, like, I don't know how much of that is true or not, because a lot of this is coming from, YouTube documentaries I watch. So mountains of salt should be taken with whatever I'm saying about this. But I think the game is kind of like an idealized version of what people want Yakuza to be, maybe.
Right. I mean, and that makes sense. I mean, definitely like the samurai and ninjas that we get in both film and television and video games are a, idyllic version of them based on legend and stories that have been passed down for hundreds of years. So it makes sense. But also what you say makes sense, because I know, well, what little I know about the mafia from like The Sopranos and stuff like that is that there was a shift when cocaine and drugs became big, where their originally like their grift was like loan sharking and gambling and prostitution, and that made them some decent money, but it also kind of kept them under the radar. And then when drugs came in, it was a huge amount of money coming in, but way more risk. And that also caused people to break with the laws of omerta and stuff like that, as far as like never talking about anything, because the penalties for jail were so much stricter than they were for the guys in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah, well, and I think they bring that up in The Godfather at some point, like, we don't sell to kids or blah, 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 and then somebody else says, like, yeah, we do, we can. Right. But the other interesting thing about Yakuza in real life, and I want to bring it back to the game a little bit, was
Definitely.
They apparently, and this is like even more mountains of salt should be poured on what I'm saying here, because this is like maybe a Wikipedia article probably, but there's something I read about the Yakuza. Like the gambling and the gaming industries in Japan are seen as sort of like not all that separate moral, or at least legally, apparently. And so the Yakuza have a big amount of control in both of those industries. Like they prop up a lot of the pachinko machines, and they also prop up a lot of the arcades and gambling. And that is interesting, because like a lot of what you do in Yakuza is mini games like that. Like in Kamurocho, which is a fictionalized version of, I forget what city. I know the Red Gate's a real thing, and I forget what the city's actual name is. But I thought that was kind of interesting, just because that's a lot of what you're doing in Yakuza is apparently what in real life those industries that they kind of have a stake in.
That interests me and kind of tickles me in a way, because like Sega, I know, does a lot of like pachinko machines and stuff like that. So I could see a scenario where like someone in the know at Sega who works with the Yakuza on the gambling side is like, hey, here's our new Yakuza game. And then they take it home and they're like, this is total bullshit, but it's fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, there have been apparently real Yakuza who have said that the game kind of represents them in a realistic way. But then one interesting thing that I forget what YouTube channel I was watching who was doing a Let's Play. One thing they brought up was like, well, of course they say that. Of course they say that it's realistic for them to be represented by this tall, handsome, dark man who's like going around helping everybody and is like a total, ladies' man. Like, of course they're going to say that's a realistic depiction. Like, that's a lot of people want to be that.
Although I will say that, like, even within the game, Kiryu seems to be this like a standout to the, because he kind of towers above a lot of people, and his stature and his prowess is such, and part of it I think is just anime, but also in service of the gameplay because it's a single player role playing game. But he is basically a one-man force of nature when it comes to combat and stuff like that. And it's kind of funny, and it's also like the thing that I complain about on like the Batman Arkham games is that I wish that at some point you would have enemies that just see you and run, because I think that would be a lot of fun. And you do get some of that in story beats where it's like when people realize who Kiryu is, like they're talking to him, because he's very understated and he doesn't say like, I'm Kazuma Kiryu, like, don't you know who I am? He keeps it so down low that it's not until people like kind of size him up, kind of listen to the way that he talks, and they're like, oh shit, we gotta go. Like, sorry, we didn't know who you were. But I wish that there was like actually, because you'll obviously get into like these random battles and stuff, which is how you grind for experience. But I think it would be fun if like after you take down like 6 of the 7 guys in this group, that the other guy's just like drops his weapon. It's just like, nope.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how they bring attention to the fact, like they bring attention to the fact it's an RPG whenever you go to like the cabaret clubs and you're talking to a woman, and like one of the options that you can tell the woman at the cabaret club is like, I don't know why, but all these punks on the street keep trying to fight me. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, yeah. He's annoyed by it.
Yeah, and it is so a role-playing game, other than the fact that it's like action-based, to the point that I wouldn't mind, and not as a mainline entry, of course, but like if they wanted to, well, it's defunct now, but if they ever did like a Vita game, or if they had done a 3DS game where it was the same type of thing, but it was just like a turn-based combat system, I'd be totally down for that.
I know that they have a Vita game that was a spinoff, and I don't know what I don't think the gameplay was the same. So they might have, I forget what the gameplay in the Vita game was like. They might have done something similar. I know they've kind of done, like, those clan battles that are in Yakuza 6 and now Yakuza Kiwami 2. Those are basically the same idea, but just a different form of gameplay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not quite a fan of that, because it's more like a real-time strategy thing, and I suck at real-time strategy. Like, it's just too much to like deal with all at one time. I'm just kind of like, oh, I guess maybe go over here. Or, this guy's attacking.
Well, yeah, I guess in the game itself, because I just finished like a lot of the side content in Yakuza 6, and that was one of them. Like they kind of have a story attached to the clan creator, which is kind of like, for those people that don't know what we're talking about, it's basically just you build basically an army of like, you basically build your own kind of Yakuza organization in a way, where you have like captains and soldiers and all of that, and then you like deploy people who can shoot or who can have grenades or who can fight, whenever you're supposed to. I suck at real-time strategy games too, but one secret to the way that you can win in Yakuza is just to like way level up 1 or 2 characters and just have them beat the crap out of everybody.
Nice.
That's basically what I did.
Yeah. There's really cool ways of being able to game the system that I have since learned, because I was actually talking to you online that I'm pretty sure that I can come close to platinuming, if not platinuming, Yakuza Kiwami 2. The only 2 that I was really worried about was there was like one. So there's a trophy for finishing all of the side quests, and another trophy for finishing all of the completion quests. And your completion guide is like, you get points and experience bonuses for doing a bunch of different tasks within the game. Anything from how many battles you fight, or how many times you finish off a guy with this certain weapon, to how many times you play this mini game. And everything in between. But one of the side quests in Kiwami 2 involved me having to finish and win a game of mahjong, and I was like looking at the rule set and I didn't understand any of it. And I was like, this isn't going to work. But then you clued me in that you earn these items that basically let you win at the gambling, you know, like they're one-time use things. But sure enough, I had earned one of those items in, you know, after I tried that quest, because I got it like early on. So I went back after I beat the game, did that side mission, put down that item, and sure enough, like I cleaned house and I was like, okay, that works. You know, I never have to play Mahjong. Well, I mean, I'm sure I'll have to play it again, you know, for the completion guide, but I'll just try to find more of those items and just like cheese it that way, because really even poker, I can't play poker. So like there's a lot of the side game, like the mini games that I'm just at a disadvantage for, because I just don't understand the rules. But it's neat that you can do that stuff.
Yeah, pretty much all of the gambling was disinteresting to me. Like there's so much side content in Yakuza that it's not going to please everyone. Right. And that's also the reason that we've kind of switched subjects so many times, is just because Yakuza has so much crap in it. But the gambling thing, like I told you about that because like I learned about that whenever I was playing Yakuza Kiwami, and you have to take Haruka, this 9-year-old that Kiryu is very attached to around town, and you have to win her trust by gambling, which annoyed me to no end because like people tried to teach me cards so many times when I was growing up, and I would just immediately get bored whenever I started hearing the rules. And so I was so glad to find those just build your luck items. Now I'm getting a little bit better at learning the rules of these things and actually being a little bit interested, but I still don't want to, like I would much rather Haruka, gain my trust by me playing like Outrun for 30 minutes, which is one of the things, but you know.
Well, in Kiwami 2, she just wants to eat all the time.
That's another, it's basically, I think I haven't played that part of Kiwami 2. I haven't seen Haruka in it yet, but it sounds like it's probably the same thing, where it's just like you have to bring her over to a shop to make her eat something, then you have to do a mini game, then you have to do some sub-story, something else. Sorry, that was my cat coming into the... Hey, Katara.
Yeah, the funny thing is that the first time that I got to do that, where I was just like walking around with her, she was saying these things, like the things that she wanted to do, but then every time that I was walking with her, it would like trigger a story-based thing, because there was actually a story around her, and I was like, okay, so maybe the stuff that she's saying doesn't mean anything. But then sure enough, the second time that I got to do that, there wasn't any of that stuff triggering, and so then I was like, oh, okay, you have to figure out what she wants, take her to that, and then when you get it, you know, there's actually like a little, I don't know, friendship meter that grows with her.
That's pretty much, okay, so that's pretty much exactly what's in the first Kiwami game then. So,
yeah.
Okay.
We should probably, because I know you picked up Kiwami 2, but you haven't played a lot of it yet. I was lucky enough to get a pre-release review code for it, and proceeded to play the holy hell out of it, trying to get the review done in time. Like, I missed the initial review embargo date, but I did get the review up before the game was released, but I paid for it. I played the game so much that I got like some sort of tendonitis or something in my wrist. It was bad. It was bad enough to where I actually missed a day of work, because I could not, like, whenever I moved, it was just like shooting pain throughout my left arm, and it was just like, I mean, I didn't sleep, like, it was terrible. And I'm not blaming Yakuza, because I've recently come back to work after being gone for a long time. So it's like the combination of like typing a lot again during the day, and then coming home and playing Yakuza for like 4-hour blocks. And also my phone is heavy and I hold it in my left hand. So it was just like a lot of things that were conspiring for this to happen. The weird thing is that, you know, I'm playing Yakuza Kiwami 2, which is a remake of the sequel to the first game. And up until this point, all I had played was half of Yakuza 0, which I really love, but I've put it down a couple times for other games. I was in the middle of The Witcher 3 before I started reviewing Kiwami 2. So obviously, like, you know, story-wise, I'm coming in at a weird point, because I've got like a little bit of knowledge of the prequel and then nothing from the first game, and now I'm here in the sequel, which I looked after I finished the game, and a lot of people seem to say that this is like kind of the best of the series story-wise. I mean, that remains to be seen for me. I definitely want to play them all now, but Yakuza Kiwami 2 starts with a really cool way, like it'll bring you up to speed, and it's optional. Like you're basically at a gravestone, and then it'll ask if you want to remember, And then it keeps coming back and saying, hey, do you still want to keep remembering? And so I watched all of that. It was like probably 40 minutes or more of recap of the first game, which was really cool. The game is just really fun. Like I said in my review, it's a game that wants to be played a certain way. It definitely doesn't want you to button mash in the combat. But I found Yakuza Kiwami 2 to be much easier than Zero. Zero, I actually finally gave up and looked up like a YouTube video of like how to play Yakuza because I was getting my ass kicked. And also part of that ended up being that I had some item equipped in Zero that was making the enemies like way more aggressive. And so basically it was like this difficulty spike for no reason. Like I don't even know what benefit you get from equipping that item. It just makes the enemies like super aggressive. And so they'll attack you from behind a lot more often and gang up on you. And it was just making for a really bad time. I was really impressed with, you know, the story, the overall presentation, but also just like how much work they did, on this remake, because this might be up there with like the Resident Evil remake on GameCube as far as how much work has been done. You don't usually see this. I guess maybe a more recent example would be Shadow of the Colossus, where it's not just like, hey, we threw on some high-res textures and called it a day. Everything has been remodeled and looks like a brand, like it looks like it belongs on the PS4 as a 2018 release. It does not look like a slouch in the graphics at all. But the funny thing is that like they still like they took all of the animations, like everything has been imported. So like you can put the cutscenes side by side and they play out the same, with the exception that Kiwami 2 actually has more. So like where cutscenes end in the original game, they'll keep going for a little bit for more exposition. And that was really cool because I was playing Kiwami 2 and I was like, wait, they're referencing stuff from Yakuza 0. Did they already have like all of this like rich backstory in place internally, like way back when they made this game in 2008? But no, they just added more story content to Kiwami 2 that brings in those elements. Cause there's actually like NPCs that you run into from Yakuza 0. There's references to Majima's storyline in Yakuza 0, especially when you do like the cabaret club management. Like they actually talk about, you know, oh, there was this, you know, guy who used to run the Grand, and, you know, and it's like, oh, wait, that's what you do, or that's what Majima did in Yakuza 0. And that's really smart, because I usually don't like prequel games because you're adding all this extra story content, but then none of that is ever addressed in the older games because they came out before. So here, and I don't know, Joey, about if this has any bearing on the first Kiwami, as far as like this stuff actually rolling into it, because I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, no, it does. In the first Kiwami, so I actually, because I bought Yakuza 0, and then the next game that came out was, I think it was Kiwami after that, and then 6 after that. Mm-hmm. I wanted to play through Yakuza 6, but I kind of wanted to have like at least the gist of the overall storyline. So I pretty much watched like all of the YouTube videos available on Yakuza like 2 through 5 as far as the cutscenes.
Right.
And I actually noticed whenever I like ran through, I think I watched through like the original Yakuza game just because as a curiosity, because that's the only one with I think we mentioned this at the start of the podcast. Maybe we didn't. Maybe this was before we started recording. But like whenever Yakuza first released, like they had that English voice cast with Mark Hamill playing Majima, and they had, I forget who a lot of the other people were, but there was like a pretty big English voice cast attached, and so I watched it just for historical curiosity, and I noticed that they added a lot of stuff to Yakuza Kiwami about this character named Nishiki. And he's a big part of Yakuza 0 because like he and Kiryu are like Yakuza brothers. They're not blood brothers, but they grew up in the same orphanage. And they add like a lot of scenes for him in Kiwami, where in the original Yakuza, like he's not really that interesting of a villain. They kind of just tell you that he has this bond with Kiryu, and they just go to sort of leave it at that. There's not a whole lot of background on him. In Kiwami, they add like basically they add all of these scenes that explain like how Nishiki became who he was from 0 to Kiwami, which like added so much depth to his character and made him such a more interesting villain.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. Like, that is going like an extra mile that I respect in such a profound way, to the point that, and I know you disagreed with me on this, but like, I totally want to see a Yakuza Kiwami 3, 4, and 5.
I didn't disagree that I want it. I'm just saying I don't know if that's like economically feasible for him. Yeah.
I feel that these games are gaining steam, just as far as like the zeitgeist in the West, because definitely with Yakuza 0, and I mean, I definitely have a bubble as far as like video game content that I consume. So maybe it's just within my bubble, but like, I felt like the Giant Bomb guys getting really behind Yakuza 0 in a huge way where they were not fans of that series at all kind of made this like shift within just like the gaming community where it was like, oh, wait, Yakuza is a thing? And then people play that game and they're like, oh yeah, Yakuza is a thing, right? And so I feel that like, you know, each game is probably selling better than the previous one did. And I'm wondering if that might be enough for them to justify remaking them, or at least I know that they've released 3, 4, and 5 on PS4 in Japan. So I guess we could at least get it that way. But I think, well, did they release them? Well, they were PS3 games. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it shouldn't be that hard to at least port them, but I would love to see them continue to go this extra mile. But so one thing I want to ask you without spoiling too much, cause I really don't want this to be a spoiler filled edition of the show. The character of Majima. Mm-hmm. Between Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami 2, is there any explanation for how he goes from kind of suave, debonair badass to the Joker? Because you telling me that Mark Hamill played him in the original dub makes so much damn sense, because when he gets introduced in Kiwami 2, I was like, wait, did he get dropped on his head between like 0 and here? Because this is not how he was in 0 at all.
Well, they have at the 0 doesn't really explain it. Like I've seen people online arguing that like, oh, you're supposed to pick up on this or that made him crazy. Mm-hmm. And there are things that like, you know, he is, whenever he's suave and debonair in Yakuza 0, there are things that happen that you could argue would drive a person mad, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know if they would necessarily turn someone into, like, it would drive him mad in the sense that he would want revenge. I don't really see the Joker aspect of it. So, I mean, I kind of agree with you on that point. Yeah, because like whenever he got introduced in the original Yakuza, and in Kiwami, it's pretty much the same way. He was just kind of this. Honestly, he's kind of a random character to me in Yakuza 1. Like, he just seems like this side story that just keeps happening because he's just there to create chaos. And like, there's not really that much of a reason in the mainline story for him to be there, other than to be like a rival to Kiryu. So like, I honestly, there are some things that I could say as far as like why he would go crazy, just not that particular type of crazy. And if I say why he would go crazy, you'll probably end up spoiling some of Yakuza 0, and I know you don't want to do that. So
yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, is that it's not wholly explained. I started watching a YouTube video about it, but then he said, well, I'm going to spoil like stuff from the entire series. So if you're planning on playing these games, don't watch this yet. I was like, okay, well, I'm definitely doing that, so I'm not going to watch this. But my thought is that maybe he started out as that like crazy character that you know Kiryu takes down, but then he ended up getting this following among the fans, and so then just became a bigger and bigger character, to the point that like Yakuza 0 was like, you like Majima so much? Well, now here's a game where you get to beat him.
That's pretty much what happened, as far as I understand it too, is that like he wasn't, because I know Toshiro Nagoshi, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, the guy that I've always seen as kind of like the director behind the series and kind of like the mastermind behind it. You know, obviously games have like 60 million people that work on them, but you know, he's kind of the creative force as far as I can tell. He seems to have this really strong affinity for Daigo Dojima, which is kind of strange to me, because like Daigo is always like, he's always kind of in the background, something that drives the plot forward, but like you rarely ever really see him all that much in the game. Like they make it clear that Kiryu has a lot of, and I haven't played Kiwami 2, and that's where And the second game is where Daigo starts becoming like a character. So I don't know like if they add stuff in to make this more obvious, but like you can tell that Kiryu has a lot of respect for him, but other than that, they don't really bring him up all that much. So there are some things in Yakuza where it's like certain characters get focused on or don't get focused on, and I'm kind of confused as to why sometimes.
Okay, yeah, because I can definitely say without spoiling anything that in Kiwami 2, Daigo is definitely, he's brought up quite a few times, but character-wise and personality-wise, he's definitely not dynamic. He just seems like, okay, yeah, you could be the next generation of the Tojo clan. I get that, but not necessarily like this is going to be the runaway star of the game, up next, like it's going to be, Kiryu and Daigo, back to back, for the rest of the series and maybe it's like you said, the director really likes him, but then the fans were like, nah, we like Majima. So we want you to focus more on him.
I don't
please.
know if the fans do or don't like Daigo because like I said before that I've watched, like, I haven't played all the series I want to, and, like, there are certain things in the story that I skip over, because, like, Yakuza 3, 4, and 5, I kind of skipped over anything that wasn't a cutscene, and there is extra dialogue in those. Like, I know that there's stuff that I'm missing because I did that, which is fine by me, because then when I play the games, I'll have something to, look forward to,
Exactly.
But having seen all of those, like, it just seems like you're supposed to believe that Daigo is the best leader for the Tojo clan because Kiryu says so. Like it doesn't, like, to me, and certain things happen where it's like, is he? Like the way that I read the story at least. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. But one of my favorite characters in the Yakuza series, since if we're going to talk about the whole one, and I haven't played Yakuza 4 yet, but one of my favorites is actually Akiyama. Who's like this homeless person that like gets a lot of money that falls out of the sky, and then he builds this thing called Sky Finance and starts funding like a lot of people who are down on their luck and need loans and stuff. And I don't know. Yakuza has a lot of like really cool characters, and it's just interesting like what fans do or don't respond to, and what the director wants, and like what it's almost like there's. Like we talked about before, there's so many mini games in Yakuza that's why we were kind of like switching directions every now and then, because there's so much stuff to do and so much of it is so different. And I feel like the characters are kind of, a metaphor for that almost, because there's so many different characters and there's so many different personalities, and it's like a bunch of people are going to respond to them very differently. And it's just, it seems like the fans and the directors of the game can't always agree on who should get focus. Because, like, to me, like, I love Majima as a character in Yakuza 0, but I think the way that he's portrayed in the games from then on, he's much better as, like, a comic relief.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and that's why it was so jarring for me, because his intro, well, he has two intros in Kiwami 2. Like, first you go talk to him, and then he wants to fight you in the Colosseum. So you was like, okay, I'll fight you in the Colosseum. His introduction in the Colosseum is batshit crazy, but also just really cool. Yeah. And it's like, okay, like this isn't the character that I'm used to from the way that I came into the series, but I'm on board. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in Yakuza 0, this isn't spoiling too much in Yakuza, because it's when he's introduced in Yakuza 0. In Yakuza 0, he's introduced as a cabaret club owner who like literally will not fight a person, even if they are like swearing up a storm and like touching the women when they're not supposed to and all that. And then by the time you get to Yakuza Kiwami 2, or just the second game of the series regardless, because, that scene is in both of them. But, and this is in the trailer, but like he's like stomping, like he comes in like a pro wrestler, basically.
Yeah.
Fight Kiryu. So it is.
Which also, it like, their love of pro wrestling is kind of inspired, because I know I like in Yakuza 0, Mr. Shakedown, like each of the, like I think there's 4 Mr. Shakedowns. They're all like current New Japan pro wrestlers, like the actual guys. And then in Kiwami 2, there's this side story where Majima has a construction company, and he's warring with like the 4 kings of construction or something like. It's always like 4 kings or 4 of something, right? Like the Cabaret Club, there's always like the 4 Sky Clubs or whatever. Like they've always got like these really elaborate names, but the 4 guys that Majima is warring with in the construction scene are all like New Japan Pro Wrestling legends. Like we're talking about, like, if we're talking in terms of like American wrestlers, this is like Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, you know, Macho Man Randy Savage, and like Terry Funk, right? It's like that caliber of time period and, you know, storied career. And they got them to come in and model and, you know, do voice acting and everything. And it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, they have like,
also because they're these, you know, there's these wrestler bodies in these super fancy suits. And it's like, you can barely fit in that suit.
Yeah. Well, not only wrestlers, but like there's a lot of Japanese celebrities in those games that they like model and then put them in the game. Cause there's actually, since you mentioned pro wrestling, the first one I'll mention is in Yakuza 6, when you go to the cabaret clubs, one of the girls that you talk to is an actual real-life Japanese female pro wrestler, Saki Akai.
Cool.
And I actually watched a video on YouTube of like their pro wrestling, which was kind of it looked like she was in one of the kind of like, I know you like is it NXT? Is that what it's called in America?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of like one of those, except the crowd in Japan is so much different than the American ones, because I watched that video and it was kind of awkward because the crowd was just so silent. It was just kind of weird. But yeah, she's a real pro wrestler. They also have, and I don't know the name of this actor, but he's in a ton of he's in a ton of crime movies that are released in Japan. He is also in the newest Ghost in the Shell movie. I know he played like the police chief or something. And he's been in American movies, but they have him in Yakuza 6 as one of the main characters. And then they also have, in Yakuza 6, since that's the one I played most recently, they have a guy named Paul Lim, who's like apparently a darts champion that you play. So like they pretty much put just about, I've kind of come to the conclusion that just about any side story that you come across in Yakuza, if it relates to like a real industry, it's probably a person that is actually from that industry.
I was wondering about that because when I was playing Yakuza 0, some of the characters looked so damn real. Especially, I think the first one for me was Kuze, who's like the first like Yakuza boss that you fight in 0. He's kind of the older looking guy with the glasses. And I was like, that looks like a real person. It was the same feeling that I got when I played like the Onimusha games, because famously, like, Samanosuke was modeled after a real Japanese actor. It was like one of the first times they did that. He's actually the main guy in House of Flying Daggers, I believe. It's that actor who plays Samanosuke. And then the character of Jubei in Onimusha 2 is modeled after a dead Japanese famous actor. And it was, you know, so it was that kind of thing. And, but just, and not to say that like the made from the ground up characters don't look realistic, but then when you meet the people who are real people, it's like, whoa, that dude looks like a real person.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much everybody in those games, like, especially in the cutscenes, like, looks like, you know, pretty real to life.
Their pores.
I was always impressed by, like, well, I'll bring this up because I think you and I disagreed on this a little bit. Yakuza 0, whenever I was playing through that, we both mentioned, like, the graphics being really good and the cutscenes at the very least. You said that you liked the game itself as far as, sorry, the cat. The cat knows how to open doors.
We're a pro cat podcast.
Yeah. Sorry. What was I going to say? But whenever you're not in a cutscene, though, I always thought that certain parts of Yakuza 0, and this didn't bother me because I was having so much fun I didn't care, but a lot of parts of Yakuza 0 to me look like they're from a PlayStation 2 game. Like, straight up, they look like the character models and the buildings to me look very PS2 era. And I actually learned that ever since the PS2 days, they were actually just building on top of that same engine. Even for the PS3 releases. And so I think that's part of why. And then I know whenever you were mentioning that Kiwami 2, like, added, like, they added so much and, like, they pretty much had the same, you know, character animations and everything, but it all looked like a PS4 game. I think that's because they basically did kind of the same thing where they just built on top of what they had in the Dragon engine for Yakuza 6. And I think that's actually a really smart thing that they do that Western developers don't always do, is that, like, Kamurocho in the Yakuza games, as far as I know, is basically like they're just taking what they already had and just adding to it. Whereas I think Western developers are more likely to like scrap things and then like start from scratch.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned that like in a really old episode of Nerds Without Pants, where I'm surprised that there hasn't been some sort of cottage industry where you have a company that's like, we modeled New York City, right? Like we went into painstaking work to model New York City in like Unreal Engine 4, right? And then you can purchase this city for your game from us, right? So you don't have to do all of that work. From what I've gathered, at least from the 2 games that I've played now, and I'm assuming that it's the entire series, that you're always going to Kamurocho and Sotenbori in the series.
You go to other places, like Yakuza 6, Sotenbori is not in Yakuza 6. You're going between Onomichi and Hiroshima and Kamurocho. Kamurocho is always going to be like the focal point, but there's like different cities and areas in Japan you go to. Like I think in Yakuza 5, you go to like real life, like kind of more wilderness areas. Especially when you're playing as the character Saejima, who, and this is not a spoiler just because it's come up in reviews, but you fight a bear as him. And, you know.
We'll get to the crazy, like a little later on, but, I will say, so like, it's a double-edged sword because for like part of me while I was playing Kiwami 2, I was like, okay, but like I've been to all these, you know, I mean, obviously, 0 and Kiwami 2 take place within, like, it's like almost 20 years apart. So there's been a lot of changes to the areas, but it's still like the same streets and stuff like that. So part of me is like, yeah, but like, it's the same place, you know, like, and maybe I'm coming at it from like a Western gamer point of view where it's like, you know, I mean, you have like Grand Theft Auto 3 with Liberty City and then a completely different city in the next game and a completely different, like a whole freaking state in the game after that, right? And so it's like we're kind of used to this like bigger, better, you know, more badass type thing where Yakuza is a lot more economical in that sense. Mm-hmm. But the upside to that is that you get to know the area really well to where like I'm getting close to the point where it's like if they say a street, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I know where that is. Like you would if you like lived in the city for a long time, and I like that. Yeah. They also do a really good job of like fitting stuff in there. Like, you know, you'll be like, you'll do the side quest, and all of a sudden you'll be like, I didn't even know that this was here, and you'll just like go into this like back alley or something, and there's a shop there or something, and you know that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, I like that better than having, because like I think about the fact that in Grand Theft Auto 5, if I want to go play darts, like, and I'm on like the other side of the map, either I'm gonna have to change characters or I'm gonna have to drive there. Whereas in Yakuza games, like if I want to go play darts, it's like if I'm not right next to one, I can just walk there within the next 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a plus.
Which also is kind of how I have understood, you know, like the more urban areas of Japan to be. Like you're always within walking distance of whatever it is you want to do. You know, so it's definitely got that feel to it. And you know, also like I have railed against Grand Theft Auto 5 for just being this like bloated, huge for huge sakes area where it's like, all right, but I'm just driving. Like I'm just driving a real long time to get to this next thing.
I don't mind that as much just because I like driving in games, like regardless. Like I'm one of the people that is very much pro Arkham Knight Batmobile, just because I really like driving around in games. But it is annoying having to get to from one place to another. One thing I will say in Grand Theft Auto 5's favor, and I'll come back to Yakuza in a second because I know this is not about, you know, too much of the comparisons, but like one thing I will say is that having been to Los Angeles, that downtown is spot on.
Oh yeah.
Like, and it is kind of fun to like revisit that in a way. But I guess to bring it back to Yakuza, that's kind of been like, for me, it's kind of like knowing that those places are based on real areas. It's kind of like a little like virtual vacation to Japan in a way. Like,
it is, you know, right down to like the way that they, because I mean I haven't been to Japan, but like you know, obviously like I've seen a lot of footage of it in different shows and movies and stuff like that. But also a friend of mine that I worked with back at my store in Gamefellas, he went a couple times while he was working with me, and he would come back with all these pictures and videos, and I'm like, yeah, this is what he showed me, you know, like going up to the little ramen stand and just like kind of slurping your ramen like right there, you know, like on this with the like the street to your back, and you just have that little like curtain between you and the people walking by. Like it just feels very authentic, and I still want to go to Japan. I think that like the really hardcore Japanophiles, you know, in America have kind of soured me on it a little bit. Especially when I was working at the store and stuff like that. But part of me still really wants to go. But then if I don't, I've got Yakuza. You know, it seems like a pretty good amalgamation.
Being such a big Yakuza fan, had my real life, you know, friends that I know in person, had them calling me a weeaboo just because of how much I talked about it. Because like that game actually made me want to go to Japan. So
yeah, absolutely. It's been fun too, just because like, again, like through the comments of like, or like stage select entries and stuff like that, at some point you went from like no Yakuza to like, oh, he's bringing Yakuza into like everything. It's like me with Final Fantasy. I can turn everything into a Final Fantasy discussion. And it's like, SuperStep can do it with Yakuza now.
Pretty much. Like sometimes I'll know it's a stretch, but it's become kind of a running joke that I'll just do it on purpose. Like something will happen, I'll just be like, you know, there's a Yakuza storyline that's basically about that same subject. Because there's enough sub stories between like the 3 games I've played that there probably is a topic that I can, you know, shoehorn it in there.
Speaking of like sub stories and stuff, and kind of getting back to characters, I did want to say that like for a game that came out initially in 2008, Kiwami 2 is very smart about the way that it introduces side content to you. Very modern, because like this is what I was really applauding The Witcher 3 for, is that you'll kind of just be like walking down the street minding your own business, and then you'll run into a scene of like somebody's making a commotion, and then Kiryu goes into a cutscene, and then Kiryu is all of a sudden in this situation because that's what happens to him. Like he's kind of just minding his own business, and then he gets into stuff, and again, Yakuza with a heart of gold, it's like he just starts helping people. And but the cool thing about it is that like, so you can just be walking down the street, cutscene starts, you're talking to somebody, you agree to help them, and then you're not walking, like they just kind of take you to where they need you to be, and then you do the thing, and it's just like this really cool way of like seeing the town, because then it's like, oh well, now I'm like across town from where I was, but then I'm going to walk down this street and then trigger something else, which I can understand, like for a certain type of player that could get annoying, especially if you're focused on doing a specific thing. But I was never, even when I was like I said, I was doing a breakneck pace trying to review this game. But then all of a sudden I realized that there was one night where I had not advanced the main plot at all, because I just got so engrossed in the side stories. They're really well written. They're really funny. And his character is so, he's the quintessential straight man, but he gets embroiled in the strangest shit.
Yeah.
And it's always this recurring theme of like, oh man, what have I gotten myself into now?
Yeah. No, one thing that you mentioned, I guess that's throughout the series, like not just in Kiwami 2, they do have that thing where like you'll be asked to, like, you'll have to get something from a store and you'll be like, all right, it's a damn fetch quest. But then in the middle of that fetch quest, you run into something that's actually really interesting. So I do like that. But the other thing that I'll mention that Kiwami 2 actually improved on about sub-stories. So in Yakuza 6, when I was playing that, I was like, the only sub-stories I'm ever missing in these games is there's a character named Joe Amon that you're supposed to fight at the end of them. And it's like this really long, drawn-out fight. And that's not too much of a spoiler because he's in every game and he's kind of like a running thing. But like, I can never beat him, so like my plan is to go back through all of these games in order, and like what I'll do is like replay them with New Game Plus and then beat him at the end and like platinum them. But the one thing about sub-stories, like I was trying to find, aside from that Joe Amon fight, I had one other sub-story that I was actually intending to finish in Yakuza 6, and I could not for the life of me find it, and I had to look it up online just to know like where to go to trigger it. Kiwami 2 fixes that by giving you the option to buy basically this thing that points out to you on the map, here are where the sub-stories are. And, and like, I love that they give you that option.
I don't remember buying it. I just remember like seeing like the sub-stories on the map. So I must have done that at some point.
You might have just gone in because it's in, I think it's mixed in with like the life skills section where it's like you can buy with like your, with your experience points.
I do remember. Yeah. I do remember purchasing
that's
now.
the one issue I would have with the way that they do sub-stories is like it works whenever you run into it naturally, but then when there's that one that you can't find, it's like, you know?
Right. And that's kind of a Japanese thing that I've noticed that they're finally getting better about. I picked up Dragon Quest XI this week and I popped it in for like an hour. So the funny thing is that going back to my wrist injury thing is that, you know, I couldn't play games at all we're going on like 2 weeks now and it still hurts. I can hold a controller now, but like I can only do about an hour before it starts to really mess with me. And I was like, well, Dragon Quest XI is here, so I'm going to try to power my way, I'm going to try to fight my way through it. Like I can probably move my character with my right hand because it's just an RPG. But then I got another review, like another pre-release review code. So I'm working on that instead. But I had to play Dragon Quest for at least a little bit. And I did notice that now characters have like a quest marker above their heads, where in older Dragon Quest games, you just had to talk to everybody. You know, you go to a town and, you know, that's how you found everything. And I still enjoy doing that, but it's a quality of life issue where, you know, if you just want to like do the thing, you need to be able to see where to do the thing at. So yeah, like I'm actually surprised that Yakuza 6 is still dealing with that, but I'm glad that they fixed it for Kiwami 2.
And that's the thing that annoys me in every game, though. So it's not like a problem that is specific to Yakuza. There are Western games that annoy me in that way, too. Like, I hate being asked to find where something is in video games. I can't, like, I was never, like, growing up, like, I mainly played, like, platformers and, like, shoot-em-ups and beat-em-ups and fighting games where it's, like, the challenge is not exploration. It's just, here's what you're supposed to do, now get good at it. So, like, that's what I'm used to. So, like, I like exploring a lot more now, but I don't like it to the point where, you know, like, I have to literally scour every inch of the city to find what I'm supposed to be doing. You know, and that's in Western games as well. So I can't, you know.
Especially if it's a thing where it's not showing you even the general vicinity of what you need to find, and then you forget about it, and then you just randomly trigger it, and you're like, wait, what is this for? Like, what is this in relation to? I picked up this quest like 6 hours ago.
Even in some games where they give you the general vicinity, like some of those Arkham games where it's like, we're not going to tell you exactly where, but it's in this radius. Like, I'll even get annoyed by that because it's like, while it tells you the radius, it doesn't tell you like what floor or what level you're supposed to be on, and it's not a 3D map. So like, that's still, that annoys me.
I haven't played it in a while, especially since I started working again, but I've been having that problem with Final Fantasy XIV where, and it would be a very simple fix, because they will have, like, Final Fantasy XIV has a, you know, icon pointing you in the direction that they want you to go on the map, but they never tell you if it's above or below you. And a lot of the maps in Final Fantasy XIV are highly tiered, especially in this first expansion. You can get a flying mount, right? So there's a lot of verticality there. And all they would have to do is, like, by the quest marker, just put an arrow up, an arrow down, or like an equal sign to say that it's on level with you. That would fix it. But no, it doesn't have that. So it's like, you can be wandering around the vicinity of it, like you're circling this quest marker, and then just like, well, it's not up here. Let me go down here. Nope, not down here. Let me go even further down. Oh, there it is. And, you know, that's, yeah, I know.
Case in point, whoever works on, like, every video game should hire whoever did the maps for Metroid Prime. Just everyone should just hire that guy or woman or whoever it was.
Yeah, it's a solved problem.
In one game, it is. One series.
Yes.
Yeah, since you mentioned Dragon Quest XI coming out, I guess we can talk about a little bit about how Yakuza is an RPG. Because, you know, since I'm notorious for not liking them, mainly because of the turn-based combat, which obviously Yakuza doesn't have. It's more of a beat-em-up combat mixed with, like, RPG upgrading elements, which are fine. And then the other way that I would compare Yakuza to an RPG is just the way that the towns are laid out. Like, whenever you're in Yakuza 6 and Onimichi, it reminds me of, like, Kokiri Village in Zelda, or, like, a town like that where it's just very quiet and you're just kind of, like, relaxing, just talking to the townsfolk, which I really like that about, you know, Yakuza 6 in particular, but also other games in that series.
Yeah, and I think it boggled my mind when I started playing Zero, because I was like, wait, like, these are all the hallmarks of a role-playing game. Like, you've got, you know, this level progression system. You've got, you know, talking to NPCs. You've got the long cutscenes. You've got equipment. Like, I was like, you equip stuff in this game? Like, what the hell is going on? Like, I did not expect that at all. And, you know, I mean, it's not a huge part of the game. And I do wish that they allowed you to change your look in the regular game. And I understand that, like, the reason they don't do that is because they still have pre-rendered cutscenes. Right. Although I think that if they do, like, if they do Yakuza 7, they should just ditch the pre-rendered stuff, and just because the in-engine stuff is just fine. Because I would like to see and I've been saying this about other RPGs too, like Final Fantasy games are notorious for this, where it's like, I want to see actual change in my character as I progress. You know, and in the case of Yakuza, obviously it wouldn't be like, oh, I've got the bronze armor now, but, you know, I would definitely want to have, like, different outfits, you know, different headgear, stuff like that. I mean, GTA does that, but also GTA does all of their cutscenes in engine, so there's not that disconnect.
Right. Yeah. And I would like that too, like, to be able to see, the only thing I guess I wouldn't need to see is, like, which underwear Kiryu is wearing, because you can change that and change your statistics too.
Right.
That, and then, like, the other gripe that I have with the items in Yakuza is that sometimes I'll equip something that says it'll do something and it doesn't really. Like, especially items that you equip to, like, that say, oh, this item will make it less likely for you to encounter, like, thugs on the street, or, like, it'll make, you know, random battle encounters less likely. And it doesn't really, from what I can tell.
It may be on it may be doing it, but on such a small scale that it's not that noticeable. Like, if you probably did, like, a side-by-side, like, you'd be like, okay, well, I'm getting into, like, 1/5 fewer fights. But at the same time, it's like, it's only 1/5, where I would expect an item like that to cut it in half at least, right? Or something like that.
I would also like the game to make it to where you would actually need those items in some way. Because, like, you really don't to finish these games. Like, at least, like, the story and sub-story, like, you really don't need... Like, it's nice to have, but you really don't... Aside from maybe the medicine, there's really nothing essential.
Yeah, I definitely down medicine a lot. I'd mentioned in my review about one of my problems was that the boss fights, they don't seem as rewarding as, like, just your regular fights. Or, like, the ones that I like the most are, like, when you're just, like, I'm running through this area, basically like a dungeon, you know, in quotes. It's like this, like, building or something. And I get in the lobby, I, like, wreck house there. I move up to the first floor, I wreck house there. And, you know, there, like, the fights are very, like, dynamic, and they feel like they're changing on the fly. Like, I remember one where there were, like, enemies behind rubble and stuff like that, so you couldn't actually strike them, and they were, like, shooting at you or throwing knives at you. And so the way that you kill them is you, like, grab items in the environment and then just chuck them at them. And, you know, stuff like that is really cool. But then you get to the bosses, and almost all of them are, like, in an arena. There's not really a lot of, like, weapons handy, and they have, like, these ungodly huge life bars that it ends up becoming just like a war of attrition. Like, it wasn't until the very end where I felt like, okay, and I think it was because I had better abilities at this point where I felt like I was actually squaring off with a challenging foe. I'm dodging, I'm charging up attacks. I'm picking my spots and kind of whittling away at them and then like hitting them with a well-timed heat action. But then also by the end of the Yakuza Kiwami 2, like the last two bosses, I like annihilated them. I was like, wait, that's it? Yeah. And part of it is because like I had like a really good weapon and I was just like, I had my heat gauge so high at that point right. that it was just like slash, slash, slash with this katana, then heat action, take off a whole bunch of, health, and then slash, 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 heat action.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that the like main, like usually it's going to be like a Yakuza headquarters that you're just barreling through, I think what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Where there's like, 3 different floors and there's like all these different doors you have to go through and there's kind of like sections of you fighting different people. Yakuza 0 has one of the best, as far as like visually being dynamic, it has one of the best sequences of that. Having played 3 Yakuza games, was it 3 or 4 Yakuza games at this point, I'm getting kind of tired of it because they do that to some extent in like every one of these. They kind of have that. There are a lot of tropes in Yakuza. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, yeah, because I was going to say that, like, so, because the first, like, real boss that you fight in, Kiwami mm-hmm. 2, the whole sequence is almost identical to the first time that you fight the first boss in Yakuza 0, where it's exactly like you said. You're barreling through this, Yakuza stronghold, killing, like, not killing, but you're like, knocking these guys out left and right. There's like these funnel points where there's these really strong guys that are blocking your path that you have to get by. And then enemies like coming in through the windows and you take them out. And then you have this really long boss fight. And I was like playing Kiwami 2 and I was like, this is beat for beat identical to what I did at the beginning of Yakuza 0. And I wasn't sure if Yakuza 0 was supposed to be an homage to Kiwami 2 or if it's just like, no, we kind of just do this.
They kind of just do that, yeah. And there are a lot of things, even within like each Yakuza has its own specific story when you look at the details. But I read a review one time that basically said like, if you don't feel like playing through these for the story, like all you need to understand is that Kiryu is dead. Kiryu's gonna beat some fools. Kiryu's gonna win. Like, and that is kind of they all have kind of the same plot structure as each other. Like, the characters are what make it interesting, and like especially the sub stories. Since we mentioned them a little earlier, I will say that having watched all of the mainline stories for Yakuza, there were things that I liked about each, specific to that game. But I think the mm-hmm. sub stories more than anything like give Yakuza its personality. Like,
yes, absolutely. And to that point, the craziest stuff. Okay, well, no, I take that back. A lot of the crazy stuff happens in the side stories, but, and I don't want to spoil it, but so one of our favorite podcasts, as far as like in our little network of like friends that or shows that we're friendly with, is the Square Roots podcast, which is all about playing classic RPGs one chunker at a time. But they have this saying on that show called Disc 3 Crazy, which is it's mainly they're mainly talking about like the PlayStation era Final Fantasy games, but also just like PlayStation era RPGs in general, because basically you get to the third disc and then things just go bonkers as far as the storyline goes. And that's usually where things kind of fall off the rails, where you're like scratching your head and trying to figure out what the hell just happened. A lot of times, like, the bad guy ends up, you find out that he wasn't the bad guy and it's this other thing that you've never heard of, or, things like that. Yakuza Kiwami 2 goes Disc 3 crazy at a point in a glorious way where I was like, more of this. No, why? I need this all the time. I understand you're trying to be this like self-serious, hard-boiled, crime drama, but you can go crazier with it. Like, honestly, in my review, I said that like, sometimes it goes full anime. That's technically not true. It goes like 3/4 anime. I would love it to go full anime in like capital letters, meaning that like, I would not mind if Kiryu threw a fireball or like all of a sudden powered up and his hair changed color. They can go that crazy with it, and I will still buy it as this crime drama, because, you know, that's kind of anime and manga anyway. But as I was telling you before we started recording, they are bringing over Fist of the North Star in October, which is literally Yakuza, but anime, because it's based on the Fist of the North Star anime property. But gameplay-wise, right down to the mini-games, right down to the heat actions, everything about it is Yakuza. So that might scratch that itch for me. But I would like the game to be even crazier. Maybe it gets that way later on, but there is this glimmer. It's this one mission, and I think it's in chapter 13 out of 16, where it's like, I remember I was playing it late at night, and I was like, I can't stop right now. I have to see this through.
I know exactly what you're talking about, because it's actually, it's referenced in like every Yakuza game after that with one of the abilities that you can get.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. It's called Something Drop. If I don't want to spoil it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. It's well known enough that I'm not sure how many people you'd be spoiling it for, but yeah, I mean, just so people have that, if they don't know what we're talking about, I won't say what it is.
Well, and I think you're talking about a specific fight, but I'm also talking about the stuff that leads up to it. And all I'll say is it involves a building. And it is such a ridiculous, over the top, like, how did you afford this? And two, how did you build this, you know, without people knowing it, type of thing. Right? And it's like, I am here for that. Like give me 10 times more of this and I'll be so happy.
Yeah. And knowing the character that you're talking about who has that building, like, I do like that character as well.
Yes. Yeah, and I know we're being vague and everything, but it's really because we want you to play these games. They're really good. I mean, like I said in my review for Kiwami 2, even though that like I had this like really spotty knowledge of the series and had only played a little bit of one game up to that point, and it's a weird place for me to really get into the series, it being like a sequel. I'm now a fan, and you know, I do own Kiwami 1, and even though I got a free copy of Kiwami 2, I purchased the game physically because I wanted the steelbook. But like, I'm gonna finish Yakuza 0, I'm gonna play Kiwami 1, and then bide my time and see if they make an announcement about 3, 4, and 5. Because I'm definitely gonna get 6, but I'd kind of like to wait and see before I play it if they're gonna like release those in some form or fashion on PS4, be it a complete remake or just them porting it from the PS3, but I'm all in. Yeah. It's a fantastic series, and like I tweeted this picture, and it had got a lot of response from it. But I had picked up Shenmue 1 and 2 HD collection the same week that I got Yakuza Kiwami 2, and I put them side by side, and I was like, freshman year versus senior year, because honestly, if we haven't convinced you by now, Yakuza delivers on all of the highfalutin promises that Shenmue was talking about before it came out. Because Shenmue was supposed to be this like very cool, real-time, realistic action RPG set in Japan. And it's realistic, it's set in Japan, it's kind of an RPG, but then pacing-wise, it's like you learn how to fight and then you don't do anything with that fighting for almost 2/3 of the game. And then the last third of the game is so much fighting that you wish they would stop. Where Yakuza is just like very, like it's paced very well. And also, just as an aside, I love the fact that the answer to almost everything in Kiryu's life is to punch it. It almost doesn't matter. Like I did a quest where I was modeling, I was doing a photo shoot. I'm like, oh, this is pretty innocuous. Still ended in a fight.
And that photo shoot in particular, since you mentioned like going full anime, whenever you're talking about him like setting himself on fire like a Dragon Ball Z character, there's an option you can choose in that photo shoot where basically he looks like that's what he's doing.
Yes, I did that pose.
Yeah.
You know, that's really what Yakuza is. I enjoyed Shenmue at the time. I haven't popped in the HD collection. I don't think it's going to hold up well at all. I think it's going to be an interesting museum piece.
Right.
But, you know, if the memory of Shenmue is something that like tickles your fancy and you're like, oh yeah, like that game was going to be so cool. Yakuza is what that game should have been. So go play Yakuza is what I'm saying.
Well, and I think Toshiro Nagoshi, who is, like I mentioned, like is kind of the mastermind behind Yakuza, I think he had a pretty big hand in Shenmue as well.
And that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Honestly, maybe it's in there. I don't know. If it's not, it's a missed opportunity. Since Yakuza 0 takes place in the 80s, if you don't run into Ryo from Shenmue, that's a huge missed opportunity. Because that should happen. That needs to happen.
I've finished most of Yakuza 0. I haven't finished a lot of the side content, so maybe there's somewhere you run into him, but I finished all the sub-stories, and I don't remember ever running into him.
Okay.
I could be misremembering, but...
That's, again, more of the crazy. Like, they could do stuff like that. They could have it to where you run into, like, Axel and Blaze from Streets of Rage. I had said that, like, the Kunio-kun games, aka River City Ransom, when you play the newer games, like the way that they're translated and stuff, Kunio-kun seems like a dude who, as soon as he graduates high school, is going to join the Yakuza. So even then, like, I wouldn't mind seeing, like, a Yakuza cross River City type thing. Cause, like, I mean, Japan loves to do their crossovers. Like Monster Hunter and Final Fantasy XIV just did a huge crossover with both of their games. So there are places for them to go. And I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything for Yakuza 6 because obviously I haven't played it. I got the impression that was very much like an end, at least of Kiryu's story.
Yeah, it's an end to the Kiryu arc.
Right.
Is what it's billed as. It goes in a different direction than I would have expected it to, because of what it was billed as the end to his arc. But I won't spoil that for you.
Cool. Yeah, and that's fine. Like I think the character. I think that they should end characters, either them just retiring or them dying or whatever, when the series has gone on long enough. Like, I've said many times that, like, they should have killed Solid Snake in Metal Gear Solid 4. They should have killed Kratos in God of War 3. Both of those games had very good cases for those characters not making it out alive, and it would have been a very good cap to those stories, but they just keep going. And I don't want to know how it ends Kiryu's story, but I do think that, like, there needs to be more Yakuza after that, and if they want to, like, pick it up with, like, one of the younger characters that he's encountered along the way, or a new character, or Haruka, if she becomes, like, if she gets all grown up and becomes, like, some badass detective or something that is working with the Yakuza, sort of like Kaoru that he meets in Yakuza Kiwami 2.
Oh, yeah, I forget her name. I was actually thinking of Batgirl whenever you said that. Or what's not Batgirl? What does she change her name to when she's in the wheelchair?
Barbara Gordon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, something along those lines, like a successor or something like that, I think would be.
Well, I think
cool.
they do have. I thought that they did have a new Yakuza game in the works.
It wouldn't surprise me.
And they were going to do something like that. Like, I think the speculation was just who the character is going to be, since Kiryu is supposed to have his arc ended.
Right. And that's one thing also. I can't lock down this dude's age, because in Yakuza 0, he seems like he's in his, like, mid-20s, but then 20 years later in Yakuza Kiwami 2, he doesn't really seem that much older, but they're calling him Old Man. But
yeah,
I don't know.
They actually bring up his exact age as 6, and in a couple other ones, like what exact age he's supposed to be. So I think he's like, he gets arrested in 1995, 10 years go by, and I think he's like 35 by the time the first Yakuza starts.
Okay.
And then it's kind of, and I think the years are supposed to kind of correspond to when the games were released in Japan. So he's like as old as he would be in that actual year if it was released.
So then what I'm hearing from that is that Yakuza 0 kind of messes things up, because he should be like a teenager in that game, but he's very clearly like 22 or somewhere between 22 and 25.
I think they
just based on dialogue.
I think they say like 20 at some point. Like they specifically say like 20, 21.
Okay.
And actually,
that might work out, because I think it's late 80s. Like, it's almost like 88 or 89.
It's 88, because it was. They talk about the Japan. In fact, the original song for that game in Japan, they don't have the same intros that they do over here because of licensing issues. But the intro for that game is actually a song called Bubble, which is a reference to the Japanese bubble economy, where it was doing really, really well at the end of the 80s, and then they had this great kind of depression economically in the 90s, apparently.
Okay. Yeah, I could kind of get that just from, like, the gist of, like, the storytelling in Yakuza 0, where it's like, we're rich, biatch. Like everybody's just like, running around with all this money. And even the money that you get in that game is like redonkulous compared to the money you earn in Kiwami 2. It's like you're walking around with like 50 million yen in Yakuza 0 all the time. And in Kiwami 2, it's like, I'm lucky if I've got $1 million on me.
Yeah, that actually kind of disappointed me when I went from 0 to 1, where it was like at the end of the game, I had like 10 million yen, or maybe even 100 million yen less than I did at the end of Yakuza 0. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I can't buy a gold statue with this.
I do like the leveling system in Kiwami 2 because it's all based on experience points, and you have like different types of experience that basically fund different types of abilities, but also all the food that you eat gives you experience points. So like you can just go into like a restaurant and just like load up on food, and as long as your stomach doesn't get full, you get experience points for that. And then in certain situations, the restaurants will give you bonus food that gives you like a little bit of experience bonus to it. Yeah. And then if you eat everything at the restaurant, you get an additional experience bonus. And it makes it for a fun way to grind, because it's like, well, I need health anyway. And if I go into here, I'm going to get my health back, and I'm going to get like this nice little bundle of XP that funds your moves. Where in Yakuza 0, it's just straight up money is how you level up your character.
Well, in Yakuza 0, they're so obsessed with the way the economy was in the 80s. Like that game is so much about 80s excess, which kind of reminds you almost of like American 80s excess, the way that it's brought up, and the scenery. But also, really quick, since you mentioned the leveling up system, like in Yakuza 0, there's like a specific point where this character, it's the homeless guy that was one of the trainers on how to fight a certain style. Yeah. He's like, you should literally spend money on yourself to gain experience.
Yeah, how does I love that line.
And then in whereas the experience stuff that you're talking about in Kiwami 2, that was all actually introduced in Yakuza 6. There's a lot of stuff from 6 that they carry over into Kiwami 2 that I've seen so far. Just because it's like they built that new engine and they have like these new ideas of how stuff is supposed to work. There's also in Yakuza 6, one of the ways you gain experience is there's this place called Rise Up, which is basically a gym. You go there, you do 2 workouts to gain like whatever specific type of experience you want, and then he tells you like, okay, now eat this specific thing, and you have to figure out what you're supposed to eat. And that's how you get experience partly in Yakuza 6.
Cool.
Yeah,
I'm getting the impression that I really do need them to go ahead and do Kiwami 3, 4, and 5, because it might be such a downgrade in user experience from Kiwami 2 to just plain Yakuza 3 that I might be like, oh man.
Yeah. I think the reason that they haven't announced anything like that is because they probably consider, since Yakuza 3 is where the series started on PlayStation 3, and so like 3, 4, 5, and 0, and the 2 spin-off games that were set in like feudal Japan, which I really want those.
Me too, yeah.
But apparently they're gonna, I don't know what it is that they said they were gonna have to translate out of those feudal Japan ones that apparently like Americans would just find incredibly distasteful. But I'm kind of curious what it is. But yeah, I think that's the reason, just because they figure like, okay, well, PlayStation 3 is modern enough that we don't have to give it this treatment. Whereas the PlayStation 2 games are old enough that they're like, all right, if people are going to play them now, we kind of have to rebuild them.
And that makes perfect sense, and that's probably what it is. My only hope is that they start looking at not only sales of like 0 and Kiwami 2 in America, but also seeing what they did with like Shadow of the Colossus, where that was a that was a PS2 game also.
Yeah, and
that doesn't make sense.
Didn't they remaster it on PS3 and then they just built it back up for PS4?
Yeah.
Because I own that on PS4. Because like I always heard, whenever it came out on PS2, I was always hearing about like, this is the game that proves that games are art. That was a big thing at the time. Playing it now, I'm kind of like, well, I mean, I believe that, but
I don't know if I ever would have said that was the game that made games art, but it was definitely an eye-opener at the time in tone, as far as, as you get further into the game and you start to realize what's actually going on. It's very poignant in a way that had not been done before. But I don't know if you go and play it now for the first time if it resonates the same way.
Because this is I bought the PlayStation 4 copy just because I thought it looked pretty. And some of the mechanics are still kind of, I think some of the mechanics like have been fixed for the most part from the PlayStation 2 era, but I can still kind of tell that there's some influence there from that era in the current mechanics, and like some of that kind of bugs me. And then like I'm just not really used to a game that's open world being quite as barren.
Right. And even back then, that was like the point.
Yeah.
Was they didn't want, it was literally like, there's nothing in this world other than the Colossi. Like, but there's also, I know a lot of people have derived a lot of satisfaction from just exploring every nook and cranny, especially when people were on the hunt for the rumored 13th Colossus, where they were just like plumbing the depths of every corner of that world trying to find it. And of course it doesn't exist, but it's a really neat, like almost like a video game cryptid type thing. Like, no, I saw it, and it's like, I have this blurry picture of it.
I swear Shenlong is in Street Fighter 2. I earned him.
Exactly. When I was in school, that's how you found out which of your friends were the liars.
Yeah, I miss those EGM April Fools.
Oh, I do too. I also just miss EGM. Closing thoughts on the series? Are you knee deep in Kiwami 2 right now, or are you taking a little bit of a break, and like what do you want, I guess, going forward?
I actually was finishing up a lot of so I finished Yakuza 6's main story recently, and then I finished up a lot of the side content to the point that I now have to figure out a way to switch my sleep schedule back to where it was. And then I started playing Yakuza Kiwami 2 right after I got done with a lot of the Yakuza 6 content. So no, I'm knee deep in Yakuza right now. And I need to stop. But as far as what I would want going forward, I would want a Yakuza movie that's actually good.
I was thinking that they could make a really cool movie out of it. They made a movie
out of it, and parts of it are really good, but the problem with it is that they try fitting all of the stories in the original Yakuza into it, and it's like, no, you're gonna need to cut a lot of fat if you want to do this.
Yeah, definitely.
And as far as for the next series, as far as the games go, I would love to see them translate the feudal Japan ones and bring them over here. I would like remakes of 3 through 5 in the Kiwami style, but I'll take remasters just for PS4, just so I don't have to buy a PS3 to play them. And as far as where the series goes next, I just hope that whatever character they end up choosing to continue the series, I just hope if it's Majima, I hope that they, bring back some of the depth from Yakuza 0. If it's somebody else, I hope they make them as interesting as Kiryu. That's all I really got.
No, that's all very cool. Like I said, I could see myself platinuming Kiwami 2, and I don't really go for the platinum a lot. So that says a lot to just how much I enjoy the game, that I want to see all of the side content. And I figure by the time I do all of the side stories, I'll be so close to platinuming it at that point that I may as well just go ahead and finish it off. Because at that point, it would just be mopping up a little bit of experience grinding and, doing some mini game stuff basically. Yeah. Cause I even just playing through the main story, I almost completely maxed out my stats. I maxed them out and then did my limit break on all of them. And then I'm in the process of maxing them out again. So, and that's just without doing a lot of extra grinding. So, some of that stuff, I'm pretty close to doing. I would definitely want to go back and finish Yakuza 0. I want to play Kiwami 1. I think right now, I got this wrist thing going on, which I'm trying. I played my review game for an hour last night, and I was definitely feeling the burn, so to speak. So I've got to really take care of this. But, I really want to play Dragon Quest 11, and that's a hella long game. I want to finish Witcher 3, and I've still got probably another 30 hours of that. So I'm going to be slowly going through the Yakuza series, but I definitely want to play them all now. And I think I'm right there with you. I would love to see that Feudal Japan one get translated. I want complete remakes of 3, 4, and 5, but, I'll take PS4 ports if that's all they're going to give me. And then going forward, what I would really like to see, and again, having only played a little bit of the series, I think I would like to see a grown-up Haruka be like the protagonist, because in Kiwami 2, there's like a little side mission where she expresses interest in wanting to become a detective when she grows up. And I'm like, it'd be really cool if she became like a really badass cop, and then that's who you get to play as when she's all grown up.
Just to maybe throw a monkey wrench in that, just in case, and this isn't too much of a spoiler because it's kind of known throughout the series, but she actually tries to become an idol for a while, and there's actually mini games based on that in at least Yakuza 5. So she doesn't, I can't really say too much else without spoiling it, but I wouldn't see her becoming a detective. Like I would be all for it as long as they explained how she like went from her character from in 6 to going back to that, like, you know, maybe bring up that she had that dream. I don't see them going in that direction, but I would welcome it as well if they did.
That's interesting, because there's actually a little side story with her in Kiwami 2 where someone approaches her that wants to make her an idol, and she's like, no, I don't want that. Like, I just want to be with Kiryu, you know, and have a regular life. And so that's interesting to me, like she changes her mind. So my other idea is them just go whole hog on the wrestling aspect and model the next character after like a hot up and coming New Japan pro wrestler and have him be the face of the series going forward. Maybe play into that. So in addition to like the martial arts stuff, you're doing suplexes and, you know, DDTs and stuff like that.
Well, you can do a suplex at least in Yakuza 6. You can come up behind somebody and grab them, and I don't know, what is that a suplex? I forget. Like,
yeah,
okay,
that's a suplex.
Yeah, I haven't watched wrestling in a long time. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that would be fun, especially like just on the hard streets, to just like, you know, plant a guy on his head with like a pile driver or something. Like, you
should have that. I forget his name, but that wrestler you've been talking about lately that you saw at NXT events and stuff.
Keith Lee.
Yeah, they should port him to Japan and then like have him be the series lead from now on.
Oh man, I would love that. He would too, because he's a huge gaming geek. So he would be like, so like, I can guarantee you that when he gets into his first like WWE 2K game, like he is just going to be over the moon.
Yeah, I knew that you had mentioned him like being really into nerd culture, so that's why I thought of it. Like, maybe he'd be down to be the Yakuza. Of course, like, you know, it probably should be somebody who's Japanese to keep with the series, but it
should, but he's so anime, like he's so into anime that like that would make his life, like, probably maybe not as much as being like a wrestler, but it'd be pretty damn close, because I mean his finishing move is based on a Dragon Ball finisher, for goodness sake. Like,
yeah, you should take the survey that they give out with Kiwami 2. If you own Kiwami 2 or any Yakuza game, typically if you're on PS4 and you go into that section where you have like your trophies and like the extra content, there is a survey that you can take to say, I want you to port these games over. And they usually give you fields to say like, here's what I'd like you to improve about the game, or here's specifically what I want to see happen with Yakuza. So you should go ahead and take that and tell them that you want Keith Lee.
I should get on that. There's also now I'm curious. I wasn't at the time, but there was that like zombie Yakuza game that came out on PS3.
Yakuza
that now I want to go back and look at, just to see like if they're having like, if they go full anime crazy with that one, and if they're, you know, doing, if it's like a jokey riff on the game. But I didn't pay attention to it at all when it came out. I remember Giant Bomb doing a quick look of it, and I watched like 5 minutes of it. I was like, okay, whatever.
Well, I mean, and that game gets like really average reviews too. Like, apparently it's not, like, it's an okay on-rails shooter. But
okay.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not a typical Yakuza game. I think it's on-rails shooter, and then either on-rails or I forget which. I think on-rails shooter. And then there are cutscenes. I think that might be where a lot of people started really liking Majima, because whenever I look up on YouTube for clips of Majima, a lot of them come out of Dead Souls. I think that might be one of the first places where like people started really liking just how crazy he was.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and do a little research on that. And I do want to go see some footage, because I'd only ever seen screenshots of the Feudal Japan one, but I'm sure there's like tons of Let's Play videos and stuff on YouTube that I want to check out just to see what it looks like.
Yeah. Only problem with that is like it's all going to be in Japanese. So.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't bother me. Like the first anime that I ever watched was like on cable access here in Austin, and there was no translation to it. I just kind of figured things out as I went. I was like, okay, I've got his name now. I've got his name. I understand what that attack is. You know.
Yeah.
Just really cool dudes in armor, like mystical armor that were like beating the crap out of each other. Yeah. Like it was pretty easy to figure out.
I've picked up some very basic Japanese from Yakuza.
Yes.
All right.
And hopefully you listeners have picked up some very basic knowledge of Yakuza and are now interested in playing it. I realize this was like a very different type of show. It wasn't a spoiler cast, but it was also like totally focused on one game. But it's a game that I was really excited to talk about, and by the time we finally get around to recording episode 138, it was going to be old news. I mean, not old news, but you know what I mean. Like, you know, I was very excited to talk about it like right after the game came out, and then, you know, delays happened. So
right.
Joey, thank you for being on the show. It's been great to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure we'll have you back. I don't know if we're going to have you on the regular episode now or what. Like, I'll have to talk to Patrick, let's see what the plan is, because I know he has somebody waiting in the back burner to like come on for a guest spot. So, you know, we're trying to bring in some new people, either, you know, just to have that extra chair, because I think the show works better with the third chair. I'm thinking more as I go on that like we're probably going to have to fill that chair permanently sooner rather than later. It's just a matter of finding the right person. But listeners, let us know in the comments what you thought of Joey on the show. And also if we've swayed you at all in possibly trying out a Yakuza game, because they're freaking fantastic.
I will not let it go until you play one.
Yeah.
Or after you play one.
Have you played it yet? Have you played it yet?
Yeah.
No, they're really good. And we didn't even really get into the heat actions, which are some of the craziest things I've ever seen in a video game. But they're just as amazing as you've heard, and then some.
Yeah.
I think one of my only complaints on Kiwami 2 was that I had a hard time activating some of the more esoteric ones.
Yeah.
Like there was a very specific one that I wanted to do where you like basically drop a guy butt first onto a concrete post, and I could never get that one to work. But then I also like took this 8-foot long like broomstick basically and then jammed it up a guy's ass and then shoved it even further with the palm of my hand, making him cry, and that was great.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's another thing that was carried over from Yakuza 6 is these really specific heat actions that it's like really excited to do, but sometimes you just can't trigger them. They're too specific.
Yeah, because I shared the one on Twitter and you said that you really wanted to activate it where a beautiful woman is walking by and you accidentally shove a guy into her boobs face first, to which point she just grabs him and headbutts him and then knees him full on in the face.
Yeah.
And I got that one to work, but it was completely by accident.
Yeah,
I just happened to hit the triangle button when it flashed.
And I've gotten it to work since, but it's been completely random for me as well. As we should probably wrap this up for the third time. But just as one little aside, like one of my favorites in Yakuza 6 that actually, once you learn where you're supposed to stand to do it is not that hard to activate, is where you shove a guy's head in a microwave in one of the Papo stores and then the guy puts the microwave on.
Nice. Yeah, I was trying to get that one to work. I tried to pull a guy into the store, but by that point in the game, I was so over leveled that just like punching dudes was like taking them down so quickly that I couldn't really get him into the store with enough health to actually pull it off.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for this special edition of Nerds Without Pants. I know it's 2 special editions in a row. We're going to work it out. We're going to get back to like regular episodes. Also hoping to debut a new feature in the relative near future. I've decided that we're going to put Pack Watch on the back burner in favor of this new segment, just because I think it's going to work better, especially with us having rotating guests coming in more often, because Pack Watch was very much about like me, Angela, and Patrick knowing these games really well and then talking about them. And so it's not going to work as well if like me and Patrick know this game and then our guest has never even heard of it. So this will be more fun of a feature when we finally get around to debuting it. But until then, Joey, was there anything online that you wanted to promote? I know you don't really do the Twitter thing, but
No, I don't really.
Kind of find you at Pixelbit.
Yeah, pretty much. Just SuperStep on Pixelbit. A few people have added me to Facebook, but I don't really do social media as much as I would if I had a podcast.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, like, because I know a lot of people have been saying that, like, oh, social media sucks and you got to get out of it and everything. It's like, but then nobody would listen to my show. Like, Twitter and Facebook are so key to, like, me getting the few listeners that we have.
I mean, it's an amazing promotional tool. I just need to not look at it for a while.
Right. And I think also it also depends on who you follow. I think I'm pretty lucky in the sense that I don't usually scroll through Twitter and get angry. Usually and if I do, it's video game related, and I'm just kind of like look at it and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, and then just keep going. So
yeah,
I'm pretty fortunate in that way, in the sense that I've kept my bubble pretty small. But you can find me on the Twitter at Julian_Titus. You can find the show at NWPcast. And as always, head over to pixelbit.com and comment on the show thread. Let us know what you thought of Joey. Let us know what you think of Yakuza, if you're thinking about picking it up. And also facebook.com/nerdswithoutpants podcast. You can engage with us there. Still wanting to know what 5 items you would want to put in your item bag, for a big adventure. That's going to be a fun topic that we'll get to in 2 weeks from now. But until then, for myself and Joey, thanks for listening, and keep it pantsless, Internet. Bye.
In sleepless Kamoro, on the edge of the western sky, above Fuji, we will look down as we build a bright new day. It's a school where the youth all gather to learn all of life's mysteries. Smiles are what we give, marching our construction. Majima, 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 Majima construction. 皆様今宵は騒ぎましょう